Hello everyone, my name is Bernadette Rutina of Human Ingredient. Welcome back to this series on organisational change. And today's session is going to be about growing your team culture. And we're looking at organisational culture, how teams can create that for themselves, and more specifically how leaders of teams, no matter what level they're at in an organisation, what they can do and how their behaviour actually creates the culture with the team. Now, the role of a leader in growing a team culture is really crucial. Most of us think about ourselves in leadership roles as making things happen, getting people to do the work, encouraging them, coaching them, planning, directing, looking after budgets, all of those things which are crucial and essential. But if you're a leader in an organisation, you as a person and how you lead others actually sets the tone and sets the culture. So if the leader of a team in an organisation, no matter where you are, small team, large team, big organisation, small one, you have positional power because you've been designated in that role. You can influence your team, you can influence others. And if you're a good leader, you'll also have personal relational abilities to bring along others with you when you are wanting to introduce new things, improve your products, improve your services, build a different way of working together and create an effective team culture. If you as a leader have knowledge about organisational culture, understand how it's created, and also have the ability to put some things into place, analyse your culture, work with others to build a culture and work out what it is you want, then you are well placed to develop the type of teams that work for your organisational direction and purpose. In this session, we're going to look at what is organisational culture, how is culture learnt, what are levels of culture. So we're going to have a look specifically at a model that is Edgarshine's model. Edgarshine is one of those people who was foremost in the research and working with organisations to recognise what does corporate culture mean, what does culture in a team mean, different to culture in the context of different countries' culture, different people's culture. This is specifically organisational culture we're talking about. We also will look at how a leader can influence culture and create it, and how teams might measure their culture to improve what they're doing. Now, here's a few quotes from some of the people that have done research and work embedding culture and changing culture in big and small organisations across the world. So Peter Drucker says culture beats strategy every single time. And you will understand why as we go through this session. Shine says culture determines and also limits strategy. So it can actually create the direction of strategy or it can limit strategy. Culture is the way an organisation does things and organises itself. Culture is consistent, the observable patterns of behaviour, and all culture is socially learnt. Now, this particular slide I borrowed from some good friends that I worked with over many years. So you'll see here acknowledgement Meg Wheatley and also Phil Boas. And Meg's work on having a look at what is management and leadership and its relationship to culture is crucial. She would talk about things that are visible and rational being the things that we manage in our companies, in our businesses, in our organisations. We manage systems, we manage structures, we manage processes. And these things are what we can see and what we can create, and they may be visible online, they may be visible in person, they may be visible structurally, and these are more rational. In the non-rational area, where this is more intangible, this is where leadership is. And leaders create culture. So these are key aspects of culture. Our relationships, our identity in an organisational setting, and you might have different identities. If you've got particular people who've got skills, say, in finance, working with people who are in sales, working with people who are creating products or delivering services, you'll have a different identity, and therefore identity will impact on the culture and the subcultures. And Meg Wheatley's, when she speaks about information, she's talking about information. How do we share information? What information do we provide inside an organisational setting to our customers? How open are we about our information, our feedback, our communication? It's all levels. And once again, you can see here at an individual level and a collective level, there is management, functions, and leadership. So if you can, the main purpose I put this one up here, the relational framework, is really so that you can understand this in connection with some of the other work, the other sessions we've done, but also to be able to start thinking about your organisation and what are the things that you manage and what are the things that you lead. And have you started to see the differences in those and how you as a leader then can influence what's happening in the less tangible area, the non-rational areas. All right, we'll keep going and we'll have a look now at Edgarshine's work on culture. So Edgarshine was a professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he also was at the forefront of researching and working across the world with organisations to look at their culture and help them to analyse culture. He created a model that is a functional model. So it's functional in the sense that you can use this to analyse your own organisational culture, your own team culture. So he would use the term team and organisation sort of a bit interchangeably in the world of culture, because a team is part of a larger organisation and it will have its own culture, and there'll be subcultures in a bigger organisational setting. So what he would be saying, Shine says we can look clearly and analyse our culture by understanding these three levels, and also by collecting information and working with others so they become more conscious of their culture as well. At the first level, you can see here we have artefacts, including all the visible and audible behaviour patterns. So we've also got structures and processes, things that are tangible, lining it up with our previous slide that we spoke about. Now, if you're a visitor to your workplace and you walk in, what you see in terms of artefacts are things like the logo, the uniforms. If you have a front desk, a reception area, what does that look like? What signage do you have? How do people work and how do they communicate with you? So the visible patterns of behaviour that are able to be seen are a key part of this first level. So Shine would say we have a very good ability as a new leader in an organisation to notice these things, because we're not embedded in the organisation yet, and we can see these things quite clearly. If we're part of the organisation, we'll just assume that this is how things are done, and the longer we've been there, the more likely it is we won't notice some of these things. Now, the next level, espouse values. This is really about what an organisation says it's going to do and be. So you will all have values that you would use. You may not have them written, but you may say, we put our customers first. We deliver high quality services. we build great teams, we have high quality products. These could be examples of values. I know one organisation I worked with, and one of their values was we value people. And then we noticed over time that the way that they worked with the people in the organisation, the management, the leadership of that organisation, didn't demonstrate valuing people, and people who were part of that organisation did not feel valued. So your espoused values are what you say about you and what you want to express about the way you work, the way you deliver services, the way you work with your customers and your clients. Now at the bottom level here, and you see over there we've got leadership and management as we did on the previous slide. The bottom level is the area where the real leadership takes place. Shine has called this basic assumptions, and he says our basic assumptions are really the sort of invisible aspects of our organisation. These are the stories, the myths, how people feel about things, what they say and don't say, the nature of the relationships, what people decide on is reality in that organisational setting. So for instance, a basic assumption, I was thinking about an example actually when I came into a new organisation. I was brought in to assist a leadership team look at culture change in a big organisation of over 60,000 people. And I was told by my own supervisor that giving feedback and being open about things, it didn't matter what level it was allowed. So the CEO encouraged this, and so did a couple of people just above me. They were all encouraging this way of behaving. So I thought, wonderful, an open organisation. So my own supervisor at a large gathering encouraged me to go to her supervisor and give him some feedback about something that had occurred in terms of presenting to the group that we were working with. Now, you can imagine how this might have been received, but I was new, given a lot of information, probably younger and more naive than I am now. And so I went to my boss, 2 levels above, and also the consultant that they'd employed. And I had a chat with them about some of the things we might do differently in a later part of the day, and had a chat with them about how the group was responding in the morning session. I realised about 2 sentences into this discussion that my supervisor, 2 levels above, and the consultant were not happy at all about what I'd said. So I had trodden on a basic assumption, which I discovered later what that was about. And the basic assumption was, you never give feedback, even though we might espouse that we're open and we are able to talk to people at all levels and be respectful, but also be honest. And so the basic assumption in that organisation was, there is a hierarchy here and you respect the hierarchy. If you disagree with the hierarchy, you don't tell them. So I discovered that one the hard way because it took a long time for that person to forgive me. You may think of your own things in your organisation where you have espoused values. This is how we treat our customers. And then you think, is that how we treat our customers? You might have an espoused value of delivering on time. But do a number of people say, oh, well, I can't do that today, and there's no way, nobody looks at how it might be done differently, or nobody looks at how to improve on-time delivery. So what are the espoused values that you have in your organisation, in your workplace, and how does your team act on those? And what other cultures and espoused values do you think are happening in your team? The way that you would say you work together, and how are the relationships in the teams that you lead? So start thinking about those things, maybe make some notes as we go through here. We're going to dig a bit deeper into the area of basic assumptions, because this is, they're not usual terms that we would use every day. So we're going to have a good look at these. In organisations, reality and truth is often determined by past experience, by the facts and evidence before us, but then sometimes reality and truth is also determined by what decisions have been made in the past and what basis those decisions have been made. And quite often what we discover is that we won't know what the reality and truth of an organisation is if we're new to it, unless we experience it, unless someone tells us, unless we make a few errors over time. How time is used, and does this mean that you get open-ended time to complete a project? Do you get very tight timelines to complete a project? Are you allowed time to create, or are you only allowed time to implement? So how time is used. Where do people say this is where you should put your time? Does it serve your organisation's purpose, direction, the outcomes that you are after for your products and services, for your internal teams? How space is allocated, owned, and the symbolic meaning of space around people. So quite often you might have an organisation where they say, we work well together, but the way that their space is allocated in their own offices doesn't provide any way for people to work well together, or it works against it, or there are systems that work against it. How you view, you as a leader and others, do you view that people are fundamentally good or bad? Do you have a view that people can change? You might know, just now as you think about your teams and others that you work with, you might start to realise that you have a view about people, and you have a view that people can change, and that's why that keeps you going and you are creating. Or sometimes you might have written a few people off. You might have decided they can't change and I'm not going to do anything with them. But all those decisions, even if they're internal ones, will create a culture, will be seen by others. So these are your basic assumptions as a leader, and your basic assumptions will influence everyone else. The organisation's relationship with its environment, the way for people to relate to each other. Do you relate to each other via meetings? Do you relate to each other over a coffee? Do you relate to each other via email? I know some organisations where even pre-COVID, they would email each other when someone was only 10 metres away from them, instead of getting up and talking to them, because that's the way they started to do things. Or somebody wanted proof of something in writing, and so they started going, well, everything we do now has to be in writing. Now, how do employees learn culture? How do any of us learn culture in an organisational setting? Well, the social conditioning processes in an organisation include the stories that people tell, the regular rituals, the induction processes. Now, induction's a crucial one, and sometimes people think the induction is only about learning the job, knowing where the tea, the coffee is, where the computer is, where the different parts are physically, and introducing new people to others. But actually, your induction processes should include many, many things about how do we work around here, what do we want to do better, what are our espoused values, and what do we need to improve on, and what you model if you're doing the induction process. The symbols and rewards, the management of critical incidents, the language that's used, and the organisational heroes and villains. So this is part of the stories. If we tell stories about past leaders or past employees, then those stories carry symbols of what is rewarded in the culture and also what is punished in the culture. We're going to go into this in a bit more depth. Now, Shine, in his research, I think he was working on this one for around 10 years with a bunch of other people, and he wrote a book called Leadership and Culture. And he spoke about how do leaders embed culture. So you may not know that every single thing you do as a leader in your team, in your organisation, this is interpreted and acted upon by every other person around you, either with a yes or a maybe or a no. So what you pay attention to, measure and control, how you react to critical incidents, how you allocate scarce resources, including your own time, what you deliberately role model, teach and coach, the basis upon which you allocate rewards and show status. So this is around recognition of people, giving people special projects which are important to them, how you recruit people, select, promote, retire and excommunicate. Sounds harsh, the last one, but we'll go into more detail on that shortly. Shine says if you can start to think about your behaviour as a leader and your impact on your team in regard to these 6 criteria, you will be a long way towards growing, understanding first what the culture is that's there, and also growing the culture that you want. So we're going into each one of these in more detail now. What you pay attention to, measure and control. Think about this one. Do you find that you focus on what is working and not working in the organisation? And this is just an unconscious thing that you keep doing and you problem solve and adjust. What's the content of what you're paying attention to in terms of working and not working? Is it budget? Is it customer experience? Is it the performance targets that you have in place? Is it how people are getting along? Is it feedback from customers? Is it feedback from your own manager? What are you paying attention to, measuring and controlling? So as we go through these, make some notes for yourself. Think about what do you actually regularly pay attention to, measure and control. This will provide you more of your conscious working. How do you react to critical incidents? I've worked in some organisational settings where something has gone wrong and people are blamed for that. What should we do? What is a critical incident? A critical incident in your organisation will be different to other contexts. So think about what might be a critical incident in your setting. Would it be a major product issue? Would it be a significant relationship with a key customer or a stakeholder falling over, or a partnership that isn't working? What would be a critical incident? Now, you know that the way you as a leader respond to critical incidents shows others and models for others what is important. It tells them straight away what you're paying attention to. So each one of these behaviours that we're speaking about relate to each other. They're linked. On what basis do you allocate scarce resources, including your time? Do you allocate time to things where some people say the squeaky wheel gets the most attention? Is that where you're allocating your time? Do you allocate your time to things that are of interest to you, and sometimes maybe forget what is needed for the rest of the group? Do you allocate your time and your personal resources or scarce resources with people that you get on better with, rather than others that maybe you need to do something differently with in your team? How do you think about what is a scarce resource? Money is a scarce resource. Maybe particular physical resources are scarce. Training, offering training might be a scarce resource. Think about the scarce resources in your organisation and how do you decide how they should be allocated. Some people might say their manager doesn't do things fairly in terms of allocating scarce resources. Make some notes for yourself and think about what others might say about you. What do you deliberately role model, teach and coach? I worked with a number of different leaders over time who were varying in their abilities. Some were excellent, some were very good, and some, of course, might have had multiple things that I didn't understand, but I was their staff member. So I looked at them and went, you're not going so well, or you're saying one thing but you're doing another. So we deliberately role model and teach and coach other people things, but then it's a bit like the espoused values and also the nature of reality and the basic assumptions. What we say we do and then what we do are often different things. So I recall one leader who said, we all meet every Tuesday morning at 9:30. This is our team meeting. This is an important time for us to share. Now, this leader then frequently would not turn up to this meeting or would turn up late. So you can imagine what the team started to think, and there was no real explanation at times. It was just, I'm sorry I was late, it couldn't be avoided. So if you're going to be a person who is going to say things about what is really important in your team, you have to follow them up. And if you're not following them up, you know you have to actually change that system. Or eventually what we said to our leader was, can we meet? We understand that you're busy and you have things that you may be called away to do. We're going to meet and we will let you know the outcome of our meeting, and then it may mean that some of the team leaders would meet then with the director and make some changes. So think about this one. Once again, make some notes. What do you deliberately role model, teach and coach? How do you allocate rewards and status? So this is a good job, well done. On what basis do you think people should be told it's a good job? Is it a regular occurrence? Do you allocate rewards and status through thank yous? Do you stand people up in front of others and give an award, an employee reward? Now, you would know from your own experiences that some people actually don't like to be stood up publicly and thanked, whereas others do. You have to think about what's the culture in your organisation, in your team that you want to create. How might you allocate rewards and status in ways that works for the diversity of people you have in your team? There may be large organisational rewards that you are part of, and maybe you can talk to your team about how they can work best for you and for others in that workplace. So allocating rewards and status needs to be done on a very conscious basis, but frequently as leaders we will do this unconsciously and others will make up what it means. How do you recruit, select, promote, retire and excommunicate people? So you might say, well, we recruit people based on a position description, an advertising, and we select them based on the best people for the job. And I would encourage you to think, what are the intangible things when you've employed someone that has got nothing to do with the job description, that has got nothing to do with their past experience? What is the unknown thing that you picked up when you were selecting someone to work for your team, to work for your organisation? How do you promote people? Same thing. What else are you looking for that's beyond what's on paper? Now, in some organisational settings, people retire and excommunicate other people, but they're still there in the workplace. So a few organisations I've done consulting work with have retired people by sitting them in the corner and not giving them much to do, hoping they'll leave because paying them out is going to cost too much. Now, you can imagine what message this sends. So this is role modelling without really thinking about it, certain behaviours. Is it good to actually have a paid employee not doing very much, sitting in a corner, while other people are working very hard? Or is it fair for that person who's sitting in the corner? Is it fair for the team? Other people have been excommunicated. I know a few boards I worked on where there were very senior executives who had not been performing, but once again, there was a financial decision made to keep the person on until their contract was finished. They were allowed to sit on the board, but they weren't allowed to vote. And if they said anything, people ignored them. So have a think about the sorts of ways, and if you're in an organisation or a team, a company, a business where this doesn't happen, that's fantastic. But think about your own experiences. What message does it send if the leaders are doing quite bad behaviour with others? And it may be quite subtle, but it has an impact and it creates a culture. It creates a culture where people have to look after themselves. What's the culture you want to create as a leader? I'm not going to take you through this because it'll be part of the slides that you get, and there'll be a workbook that goes with this. So it's an exercise for you to do where you can really have a look at those culture embedding mechanisms for leaders and identify a number of them that you really think are important to you. Make some notes and then step in the shoes of other people in your workplace. Do your best to see you through their eyes and write down what they would say you're doing against these criteria. I worked with a fellow a number of years ago. He was a leader of quite a large organisation in southeast Queensland, about probably 3,000 or 4,000, so medium-sized organisation. And he had a team of leaders that he got together and he talked through the culture embedding mechanisms, and he asked each of his team, his senior team leaders, to tell him how they saw him. So he was asking for feedback against these criteria that we've just gone through. If you feel good enough in yourself to do that and open enough, I would recommend it. It created a whole new way of working for that team. And strangely enough, the CEO of that team, he reduced his workload through that process. Others took on more because they wanted to, and he wasn't sure. He didn't know that before he did that activity. So it was a very, very useful one. All right. Now we're going to have a look through team effectiveness criteria, and this is all related to the culture. So you can use these because there's a tool online, and I'll provide that information for you, and you can get your team to rate these. But let's talk through them simply so that when you want to use them with your team, you can. Do you have good mechanisms in place for getting feedback from your staff, from your other people in the organisation who work with your team, from your clients, from your customers, from your stakeholders? Do you have adequate mechanisms for getting feedback? And then do you act on those? Okay? Do you have adequate decision-making procedures? Or are decisions made on the run and people don't quite know the decision's been made, and then they find out afterwards and it changes their work? What are your decision-making procedures? So there'll be an article on this. You can go through it so you can use it. Optimal cohesion. So optimal cohesion is really there's sufficient cohesion in the team that you have, and it's optimal to get the work done. Now, if people aren't it's not a cohesive team, you know that it affects the outcomes of the work. It affects performance. It affects how people feel about coming to work. It affects their energy levels, and it affects the outcomes that you're really there for. Do you have flexible organisation and procedures in the way things are done? Because in a world that's rapidly changing, and it has been for a good, for the last 100 years, much more rapidly changing, and then we experienced COVID last year, another big way of changing and having to be flexible. That's where I think probably a couple of years ago, the term pivot came out. So this is around being flexible to do things differently because we understand the world changes. Do you have maximum use of member resources? Are you using all the skills of your team to the best of their ability and your ability? Do they need development and training? Do they need extra support? How can you use their resources, their abilities, their capabilities to get the best outcomes? Is there clear communication? Do people understand what's happening? Are goals accepted by the team members or not? Do they understand the goals? Do they know what the goals mean? Do they know their role in fulfilling those goals? And are they accepted? So each one of these might have some little subsections under them you can think of. Feelings of interdependence with authority persons. So this means that if I'm in your team, I actually can contribute well and have an adult to adult conversation with you about the best way to get work done, to let you know when there are problems and develop some solutions with you. So interdependence is not dependence. Many people who are leaders and use their authority to keep making decisions, tell others to do, but don't pass on the thinking processes, the learning, the understanding as they go. So see if you can create interdependence, and this will be if you use these criteria and you get people to respond to these, they will let you know to what extent that's happening. Shared participation in leadership functions. So I have a very good experience of this when I was overseeing some of the culture work that I was telling you about in this team, where my own director said to me, I want to do this hands-on project, and that sits under your area. And my area was the leadership and culture strategy piece and delivery of leadership development and coaching in the organisation. And she said, I'm going to deliver these aspects of leadership with these groups. And so that's my project, and I'm going to get you to oversee that. So I'll report to you on that. That's probably an unusual one, but I do know many leaders who are passionate about doing some hands-on work, as well as doing the strategic, the bigger picture aspects of their work. And so think about you as a leader. How do you share participation in leadership functions? Because this is part of creating a good culture. Acceptance of minority views and persons. So many of you would know this. How do you include and assist people, bring people with diverse views, diverse backgrounds into your team, into your organisation, so that you get the best outcomes, and this will greatly assist your customers in that way as well. For teams to learn and develop their culture, they have to study their own progress over time and identify weak spots in how they're operating. So the last list that we went through, that criteria, if you do an assessment there using those criteria, to what extent is it happening, you can actually start to measure things. What is happening in terms of the best ways of being, working together, relationships, getting work done, goals, all part of culture. So you can see here, you need to sense change, ensure that relevant information is available and acted upon. Look at what needs to be done with internal processes, and also look at new behaviours or products or services to respond to the external impacts that are coming into your organisation. Obtain feedback on the go all the time. How are new things being dealt with? So if you want to undertake change in your organisation of anything, you have to understand the culture of the place, your role as a leader, and also then, is the change going to challenge the culture, the ways of doing things that people have always done, the things they're attached to, the things they think are important? Because no structural change, no service or product change will work unless it's connected to the culture. So here we have the link to the team culture assessment and some steps that you can follow to use this one. So really, really important for you as you think about going forward and using what you've learnt today and what you've learnt in the other sessions is to apply these in your teams. Lastly, I'd like you to reflect on your learnings, your next steps, and what you will apply beyond here. It's crucial for all of us, no matter what level we're at in our organisation, business owners, leaders of small or large teams, for us to think about, what do I need to apply? How can I really start to do the things that are needed for my team, for my organisation, and for my customers and my clients, and the community that you work in. It's been great working with you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to getting together with you again sometime.